Warning, the following program was produced for traditional broadcast television. Over 12 minutes of commercials have been removed, but interruptions are still included. Thank you for watching.
Washington, D.C. is buzzing with a thing called the Clarity Act, and the crypto industry and the banking industry have been going at it.
If I were a bank, I would try to block this bill too. The longer we have this regulatory gray, it's good and bad for crypto, but it allows the banks to continue to get up to speed on this asset class and retain their customer base. This law promises a mechanism to determine what asset is a commodity versus what asset is a security. And this law is really seen as kind of the final unlock for institutional adoption.
Government officials, we will continue to keep you informed as this story unfolds.
Welcome to the Money Block with Matthew J. Moore, the Bitcoin-focused program that's waking the masses to the fiat money Ponzi scheme. Money is changing, and your freedom is at stake. So stick around and learn how to empower yourself for this new digital age. Now, here's your host, Matthew J. Moore.
And so, welcome America, welcome world. Man, do we have a show for you today. We are syndicated coast to coast on BizTV, and you are watching the Money Block, America's Bitcoin-focused TV and radio show on BizTV. And wow, you know, lots going on in the crypto space right now. Regulation, laws, politicians talking about getting this stuff through. What does it all mean for the crypto space? Well, we're going to cover it today with our guest, and I'm excited about it because she's a returning guest. And she's with a company called StarkWare. She's the general counsel. Her name is Katherine Kirkpatrick Bos. And Katherine, I know we only have a short go at this first segment here, so let's tease the topic here. Washington, D.C. is buzzing with a thing called the Clarity Act, and the crypto industry and the banking industry have been going at it. You know, let's talk about this, because as much as the fierce of the fights have been, this is important to not just the crypto industry, but possibly even the banking industry. Talk to us about how everyday investors should be looking at this. Even business owners should we be paying attention to this right now?
Absolutely. So the Clarity Act is the comprehensive crypto market structure law that crypto has been dying for. We've already seen laws like this overseas. The EU has a law like this. Multiple other jurisdictions have had these laws in place for years. And this law is really seen as kind of the final unlock for institutional adoption. I always talk about Bitcoin Econ 101 has all the attributes of a successful currency, except a clear set of legislative and regulatory guidelines. So this is that missing piece. And we're all cautiously optimistic, although it really has quite a long road to actually turn into law, even at this point where we're finally seeing some momentum.
Yeah, there's a lot to dive into when it comes to the journey that this act has gone, and there's been a lot of proponents, a lot of people also against it, but the administration has been very for this act as well. So with about a minute left, what's your take on the administration's approach? Do you think they've been effective, or do you think there's things that they should be doing differently?
President Trump is very pro this act. He's been a friend to crypto. He's been a friend to innovation, frankly, and this bill is pro-innovation. Now, the one problem that they're going to run into, frankly, it's not so much something that they did, but it's timing. Okay, we need to get this bill done before the summer recess. We need to get this bill done before the midterms, because obviously if the Republicans lose seats, this has now become a bit of a partisan issue. It's harder to get the Democrats on board, although some Democrats do support this. So there's some logistical issues, reality of how legislation is passed.
Yeah, the last thing we want is for us to have another SEC situation, Gary Gensler, I should say, and we want to see momentum and progress for this industry. So I'd be really interested to hear your take on not only how this is going, but maybe what the best strategies are moving forward. And if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't pass, what does that mean for the industry? And if it does pass, does that mean we might enter into another crypto bull market? Well, we'll find out, but before we got to go to break. So when we come back, we'll go deeper into the nuts and bolts of this conversation with Katherine. So I want you guys to stick around. We got a lot to cover. I promise you, it won't be a boring topic, and it might be very relevant if you are invested in crypto. It's very, very important to stay aware, because the tides are turning and things are changing. So we'll be right back after this break. Stay put. We got more with Katherine. What does it mean to be physically, spiritually, and financially free? The right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, these were the ideas that made America. But what happens to these ideas when America's money becomes compromised? What do you do when the very thing that you're working for day after day is fundamentally designed to enslave you? Whether it was a conspiracy or not, you won't believe what is about to happen in this country. Arm yourself today with the truth and build your life on the foundations for liberty. Rediscover freedom in the 21st century and grab a copy of my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty. For just $11.99, you can support this radio show by finding a copy on Amazon or by going to mattjmoore.com. Again, that's mattjmoore.com. Don't wait, because freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen. And man, are you in for a treat? You are watching The Money Block. Yes, that's right. We are syndicated coast to coast on BizTV. Whether you're watching online, radio, welcome, all you Bitcoin newbies, lovers, and experts. And in fact, if you are watching online, be sure to give us a like, comment, subscribe, be a part of the conversation. Let us know what you think about this conversation today, because today we're going to be talking about something called the Clarity Act, which is important for the crypto industry, digital assets, and its future. Because one thing is straight, the technology is developing, the technology is moving fast, but governments need to catch up, and they need to put into place some guardrails that can give people some clarity on how things should go. So on the line, I have a returning guest, and she's with a company called StarkWare. And but before I continue our conversation with her, I just want to remind you guys, if you're watching today and you're thinking, man, Bitcoin, sound money, cryptocurrency, how does this relate to my personal finances, to my personal freedom? Well, it's very important. In fact, I've got a book. It's called Foundations for Liberty. It'll get you started. It's a primer to help get some of these main principled concepts into your mind and getting you brainstorm about it, because it is going to impact every aspect of our life. So go ahead and download the book. It's a free gift. My way of saying thank you. There's a QR code right over there. Get out your phone, scan it. But on the line, like I said, we've got Katherine Kirkpatrick Bos. She's the general counsel of a company called StarkWare. She's been absolutely busy up in Washington, D.C., having conversations with lawmakers and advocating for some positive legislation that could bring clarity to everything. So, Katherine, I want to start here. The House passed this bill last July. It went through the Senate Banking Committee. And so I guess my question here is, what is the next hurdle for the Clarity Act so that we can get some rules to the road when it comes to crypto and digital assets?
You're absolutely right. So it got through the House. It got passed out of committee, so it was marked up. The Senate committee debated the bill, fought off a number of pretty aggressive amendments, got to the point where they passed it on. Now it needs to be voted on by the Senate itself. And so the Senate needs 60 yes votes for this bill, which 60 to pass actually, above the threshold of 50 to kind of get it to the next stage, which means 8 Democrats have to join the Republicans in okaying this bill. So that's a significant hurdle. However, there are Dems on board, because there are many people that see this bill as not just necessarily pro-crypto, but pro-innovation, really an unlock to make sure American companies have the ability to build and contribute to the overall growth in America of this, emerging technology and revenue sources. So once the Senate passes it, we're cautiously optimistic, then the Senate version and the House version have to be reconciled. They're different. They're materially different. So the two houses, or the two contingents, need to kind of debate and settle on one version together, significant hurdle. Then they revote and the president signs. And all of this, realistically, from the pragmatic perception, needs to happen by summer recess, because then the legislators turn off, they get distracted, we hit midterms, and everything changes.
Yeah, and at its core, the Clarity Act, what it's going to do is finally draw a pretty line in the sand when it comes to the SEC and the CFTC. What's a commodity? What's a security? How important is that? Because it seems that, it's kind of been up in the air in many ways, and so we really need that to be finalized and in stone, don't you think?
1,000%. We saw during Chair Gensler's regime the SEC took the position that almost all crypto assets were securities, which was hugely problematic. The SEC also went after a bunch of crypto companies for registration violations. Basically, you have these crypto assets that are securities and you didn't register. It was a problem for growth because builders were afraid to build in the United States, so they went offshore. This law promises a mechanism to determine what asset is a commodity versus what asset is a security. So that clarity, that kind of token taxonomy, allows builders and companies to grow and to build in the United States in a manner that enables them to not be afraid of basically being sued by the regulators. Yeah. And the other key here, of course, is that we are seeing more collaboration between the SEC and the CFTC in the United States than we have ever seen before on these issues. That's good for the market. That's good for the individual retail participant. And it's good for just broad-based understanding for these companies. They're more able to navigate the regulatory arena if the two financial regulators are working together, as opposed to a few years ago when the SEC was saying all of these assets were securities and the CFTC was saying, no, some of them are commodities, which as a market participant, that's nuts.
Yeah, well, one of the most talked about parts is this thing called the mature blockchain test to help decide whether a token gets the CFTC oversight. For our viewers, can you explain how that works, why it's important?
Sure. So basically what this says is a blockchain needs to meet certain parameters to qualify as mature. They have to be open source, open code. They need to effectively, most importantly, not be subject to the control of a single person or group, including one group cannot hold more than 20% or more of the tokens, operate on pre-established transparent rules, and be kind of functional and tied to a decentralized governance process. And if the blockchain qualifies as mature, this is the Clarity's Act's mechanism for deciding whether a crypto asset should be regulated as a commodity. So it determines when a chain has developed enough independence to move beyond the issuer-focused disclosure regime. And what I mean by this is securities have specific disclosure requirements. And they say in order to be a security, you need to have all of this information available to any individual person if you want to pull a 10Q or a 10K. But the whole idea is, well, if there's a system tied to an asset that is mature or decentralized, you have the accompanying transparency. So there's no disclosures for gold or wheat or cows, right? Or there's a number of other commodities. There aren't disclosures tied to that because everyone has that information at hand. So that's kind of the litmus test for making that a very important differentiation.
So I know the probability of the bill passing in its current form is probably small, but if it does pass, what kind of boost do you see it giving to the industry and innovation as a whole? I mean, does this ignite a new bull run in your opinion? Not that you have a crystal ball, but I would assume the clarity of the situation for the industry would give institutions a whole big green light.
I hope it does. And, it's indisputable that this would give a degree of firepower to the entire crypto environment. And when I say crypto, I that includes traditional financial services entities who are, experimenting or growing into crypto. The one question mark I have is, it's interesting when you look at Polymarket, I think the passage is at something like 70%. And I disagree with that. I mean, I hope it's 70%. I certainly hope this passes. I'm a little bit more pessimistic because there's a few big impediments. One is that the Democrats really want an ethics provision inserted in the bill. Two is that also the Democrats, but actually some Republicans also are a little afraid of the implications for law enforcement. They think this one provision of the bill that protects developers is too loose and will allow bad guys to use this. And three, there's ongoing fights around yield. So those are three big impediments that need to be resolved prior to passage. So part of me says, okay, this is already priced in. Like passage is already priced into the market. The market is optimistic. However, again, this will really give any individual who wanted to engage in crypto or any entity that wanted to engage with or grow their crypto or tokenization or blockchain-based payment system. I could go on and on and on. It gives them a degree of certainty that they can do this in a way that operates well within the bounds of the law. So it's hard to argue that that's not going to give a boost to the whole ecosystem.
Well, with 1 minute before we have to go to break, I mean, is there one specific industry or one specific group that's going to be the biggest hurdle for this to get down to the finish line?
The banks.
The banks. Well, I definitely want to go deeper into that conversation, but just real quick, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, the banks and crypto engaged in a yield compromise, which we can go into more depth later. We don't have the time now. Well, now the rumor is that the banks are backtracking because there's been a lot of traction with fintechs, including an executive order from the president last week that allows more and more berth for fintechs to get to do what banks traditionally were doing. So all of this clarity, the Genius Act, executive orders, they're all impeding on the bank's bread and butter. So if I were the banks, you're under siege, your revenue's under siege. I'm going to do everything I can to block that.
Yeah, the regulatory moat, I guess, is at stake here. But with so much pressure coming their way, I don't know how long they'll be able to hang on to that advantage. Would you agree with that sentiment there?
Absolutely. Every day, I mean, it's hard to dispute that you have a better mechanism of allowing retail participants to engage and access to alpha. There are better opportunities technically and functionally available than what banks are offering. So, there's a long history of legacy participants fighting innovation, and they always lose. Yeah.
Well, we got a lot to unpack in that. So when we come back after this break, we'll go deeper into some of these hurdles that we're facing with the Clarity Act and what it means for you as an investor. Stay put, because this is all relevant if you got money in the digital asset space. All right, we'll be right back after this break. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is round 3, segment 3 of the Money Block. And if you're curious, we are coast to coast on BizTV. If you're watching online, well, call up a friend, tell them to tune in. If you're watching online, well, be a part of the conversation. Like, subscribe, and comment. Let us know what you think about today's topic. Today, we've been having a great conversation about some legislation, the Clarity Act, up in Washington, D.C., keeping our fingers crossed that this gets through the finish line for the digital asset space. It's very important that institutions, individuals know that there are some guardrails and that we have some clarity on who has jurisdiction over what. So if you were watching last segment, I have had a wonderful conversation with our guest today. She's the general counsel of a company called StarkWare. But before I bring her on, I just want to remind you guys that if you're new to this space, you want to learn more about sound money, digital assets, the core principles and ideas that cultivate in this industry. Well, be sure to download my book, Foundations for Liberty. You're going to see a QR code there. My way of saying thank you for tuning in. It's a free gift. So what you waiting for? Go ahead and scan it, download that book. All right. Well, on the line, I've got Katherine Kirkpatrick Bos. She is the general counsel of StarkWare. And like I said, we've been having a conversation about this legislation called the Clarity Act. She's been front and center in the conversations, in the rooms that matter. So, Katherine, let's start here. There's a huge tension. We kind of talked about this during break, but there's a huge tension between stablecoin yields and rewards. The banking lobby, the crypto lobby. Obviously, there's a lot of money at play. A lot of people are talking to politicians, trying to get them to vote a certain way. Where do you see this fight landing? I mean, does it matter how this unfolds?
This is definitely a hot button issue. So basically what happened is this almost ruined the bill, frankly. This is a big fight. Of course, banks are furious about this because cutting into, allowing people yield via stables. If you're an average person, you can hold your money in stablecoins and earn all the yield, or it can sit in a bank and you can get a fraction of that. It's a very easy win for crypto. So where it landed is the two contingencies, like the crypto side and the banking side. They agreed to a compromise where yield on payment stablecoin balances is prohibited in a manner that is economically or functionally equivalent to the payment of interest or yield on an interest-bearing bank deposit. So it can't look or feel like yield on a bank deposit. but yield is permitted if it's based on bona fide activities or bona fide transactions that are not economically or functionally equivalent to the payment of interest or yield. So the best way I can explain that is you can have yield on stables that look and feel like credit card reward points, but you can't have yield on stables that looks like yield on a bank account. So this was the best kind of compromise where both parties were unhappy. Crypto's made peace with this. The bank core businesses are under siege, not just by crypto and stablecoins, but also just by fintech provisions. There was an executive order just last week that had an impact on, allowing Fed master account access to fintechs. So banks are really trying to do everything they can to continue to make their businesses as appealing as possible. There's a sense that they're still generally unhappy, and there's no reason for those very important, powerful legacy market participants to support this legislation. So that's a tough hill to climb.
So the bill, obviously carves out these new rules for DeFi and ancillary assets. How do those provisions try to balance consumer protection and decentralized nature, like the decentralized nature of the technology itself?
This is so hard because decentralized finance, or DeFi, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, but just in case, the whole point of DeFi is you replace traditional financial services intermediaries with software, with algorithms that are effectively, they're called smart contracts, but they're basically algorithms that auto-execute when certain terms are met. And you can see why that would be valuable. It creates efficiencies, it saves costs anytime you cut out intermediaries. But the problem is we're now dealing with software, not companies. So a lot of the legal impositions that exist were drafted with human beings in mind, not software. Actually, these issues are somewhat similar to what AI is grappling with, or autonomous agents are grappling with. And there's a fine line between kind of ensuring that there is some visibility and transparency and accountability for DeFi versus trying to impose the same legal requirements on DeFi that should exist for human beings.
Sure.
And, prosecuting DeFi because they don't meet certain requirements that they can't meet because of the innate nature of the technology. I think this bill does a good job of really kind of addressing that, but not going into the nitty-gritty details of trying to regulate DeFi, which is basically impossible.
Sure.
But it's not perfect.
Do the lawmakers realize the futileness of trying to regulate DeFi in many ways?
I think they do. DeFi has had incredible advocates, a lot of really strong policy voices in DeFi. The DeFi Education Fund in particular has a huge Washington presence, has done an incredible job educating legislators about what DeFi is. So I think we're finally at the point where legislators understand the distinctions. One of the other big issues that I referenced prior is there's a piece of the bill called the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, or the BRCA. And this was crypto's and DeFi's most important part. This is the one thing that they wanted to support this bill. And this piece of the legislation basically protects developers. It says you can't prosecute developers for violating things like money transmission, which is a criminal offense. And that was really important to DeFi. I think crypto's really happy that that's in it and that survived the amendments in markup. Others are not so happy because they say, well, DeFi developers shouldn't get a free pass.
Yeah. Well, okay, so is that, there's been disagreements. We've talked about the banks and the crypto industry, but has that been the biggest internal disagreements when the sausage making is going on with this bill? Have there been other issues of contention?
I think that's been a big piece. It's really interesting. There was traction a while ago, and Coinbase was one of the biggest participants that really held up the bill months ago. And I will say it was the yield provisions. Coinbase and some of the larger entities in crypto, they are in a very different position than a multitude of the crypto startups. And to be fair, there is an argument to be made that this bill is not good for the Coinbases of the world because it will make it easier for small crypto startups to get a beachhead. So there was definitely kind of infighting surrounding yield before it even hit the point where it was the banks versus crypto. It was crypto versus crypto. There were other kind of internal, I wouldn't necessarily say fights, but disputes about within the DeFi provisions who counts as a financial intermediary. What is DeFi? And I should also add, there's coalitions like Stripe and Coinbase were together versus everybody else. Also, last, very important, the no bill versus a bad bill. This bill's not perfect. I'm the first one to say that. It's not perfect. But I don't think the perfect should be the enemy of the good.
Sure.
And I'm very concerned about a situation in a few years where the Democrats take the presidency and we have another Gensler-esque regime. So I'm willing to take an imperfect bill. Not all of crypto feels that way.
Yeah, very, very well said. Very good point. There's some other areas I wanted to talk to you about. This fear mongering about banks losing their deposit base. Wanted to see if that, because I think banks can also benefit from this. I mean, can they not, with this passing, can't they incorporate digital assets and these kind of new services into their operations?
Absolutely. And we've already been seeing that. In the past couple of years, I think what everyone's noticed is this mass entrance of institutional participants into crypto functionality.
Yeah.
And you go to any institutional conference any crypto conference, it's flooded with people in suits. Okay.
All right. Well, we got to go to break. When we come back, we'll talk more about that. All right. We'll see you guys after this break. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It is segment 4, round 4 of the Money Block, America's Bitcoin-focused TV and radio show, syndicated on BizTV, coast to coast. And I just want to let you know that if you're watching on TV, well, call up a friend, tell them to tune in. And if you're watching online, hey, be a part of the conversation. Comment, like, subscribe. And let us know what you think about the Clarity Act and the conversation that we're having today. Because, yes, Washington, D.C., legislation, it's all part of the mix. And the sausage, the way it's made, is sometimes unpleasant. But we got somebody who's had a keen eye on the whole situation, been in the conversations in the rooms that matter. Her name is Katherine Kirkpatrick Bos. She is the general counsel of StarkWare. But before I bring her back on to continue this wonderful conversation about the new things taking place in the industry, I just want to let you guys know that I'm thankful for you tuning in, and I'm giving away a free download of my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty. You'll see a QR code pop up right over there. Scan that, and you can get a copy of that. It'll help give you the primer, the tools and ideas that you need to maybe operate and understand things like sound money and where this whole digital asset space is going. So be sure to grab a copy of that. All right. Well, like I said, we're going to continue our conversation. And so, Katherine, I want to pick it up here. Before we went to break, we were talking about how banks and the industry itself, the banking industry, could benefit by the incorporation of things like digital assets, tokenized service, blockchain payments. There's a whole plethora of new things that they could incorporate into their business model. Is it going unnoticed? Do they just don't want it at all? Tell the viewer where this discrepancy is between their disgruntled nature.
They want it. Look, I mean, the institutions are here. JP Morgan has a huge division, Connexus. It actively builds and utilizes its own private and public blockchain infrastructure. Everybody has a digital asset division. A few years ago, I used to say crypto was like TradFi, or traditional financial services, secret girlfriend. They liked her a lot, but they wouldn't introduce her to their friends. That is no longer the case. All of the traditional legacy institutions are in it. They're in this space. They have a division. They have a head of digital asset strategy. The problem is they understand that crypto, to some degree, has an advantage. Certain companies have been building a lot longer than they have. They don't have the regulatory limitations that a lot of these banks have, so they're more free to experiment. So frankly, if I were a bank, I would try to block this bill too, because the longer we have this regulatory gray, it's good and bad for crypto, but it allows the banks to continue to get up to speed on this asset class and retain their customer base. There's always going to be a contingent of market participants that aren't going to fully engage without legislation, and TradFi can capitalize on that.
Yeah. Well, I was listening to a conversation, somebody made a good point, which is you go back to the days of the birthing of the internet, you had internet companies. Well, now, we've had this conversation around crypto companies in the banking industry. Well, it seems like the lines are going to continue to be blurred between a traditional financial institution, a crypto company, and even fintech. It's all these three elements are going to become one, and we're just going to be talking about Coinbase and JP Morgan, and it's not going to be necessarily a differentiation in many ways. Do you see that being the evolution of the space and these services?
Absolutely. You make a great point. I mean, some people remember when there was an internet stocks category, right? That's kind of ridiculous when you think about it now. You saw an absolute flurry of crypto IPOs this year. So you have a number of crypto public companies. You also have a large number of crypto centralized exchanges, including Coinbase, Kraken, others, that are trying to be the exchange for everything all in one place, not just crypto. The big thing that we haven't talked about yet is tokenized securities and tokenized assets that have nothing to do with crypto. So tokenized gold, tokenized securities, and the legal mechanism to getting to that point. So you have now the ability, well, not just now, but in the very short term, to go on Coinbase. You can trade Bitcoin, but you can also trade OpenAI, and you can trade perpetual futures, and you can trade derivatives all in one place. So that's going to create even more of a convergence than what we're seeing now for the average kind of retail user experience.
Yeah, and and the Clarity Act is important for that tokenization aspect. Am I right?
Absolutely. Tokenization, we've gotten some guidance from the financial regulators on tokenization and what that means, namely that, of course, the tokenized security is still a security, but everyone recognizes the immediate use cases for tokenization. One of my favorites is just tokenized collateral and derivatives trading. It effectuates something called atomic settlement, which is immediate settlement, no delays, right? Everyone can grasp the material value of speed, and a lot more that we could go into on the technical front. But that is a huge piece of this tokenization, how this is going to change payments, how stablecoins are going to affect the entirety of the financial system, the global financial system, the ability to trade 24/7, 365, which is considered kind of the next frontier of financial services. Clarity has a bearing on all of that. The other thing that we haven't even touched on is the power of the crypto lobby. And that is something that cannot be disregarded. There's something called Fair Shake, which is a super PAC. And at one point, it was the largest single issue super PAC. Now I think it's number 4 or 5. But, they've raised, last I checked, something like almost 200 million in cash on hand leading into the midterms. So they have a war chest to support pro-crypto legislators.
Yeah.
And, we would be naive if we didn't acknowledge the reality of the fact that money talks, okay, when we're talking legislators and what they're going to continue to advocate for.
Well, and I know you made comment earlier to me offline here, but you're not so confident that you think this is going to pass. What's your give us your feel on it?
I think the biggest impediment is just timing. Okay, like if we had a few months to get this done, I would be a lot more optimistic, but we're looking at an ultra compressed timeline. And, we're really looking at a threat to the prioritization of this bill, both with the midterms, but also, let's be honest, there are other issues that are at the top of the list of priorities for legislators, like, macroeconomic geopolitical issues like Iran and the border. So it's hard for any legislators to truly prioritize crypto. It's more of an ancillary focus. So we're fighting sheer logistics to get this done. I'm at maybe a 40%. Hopefully we'll see some traction in the next few weeks that will increase that optimism.
And we may not get a fair shake at it again for quite some time if it doesn't happen before midterms, is what you're thinking?
Absolutely. I mean, who knows where the midterms are going to shake out. If we see the Republicans retain power or grow, that will materially improve the chances of this getting traction. Because again, this has repeatedly been a priority for the president. But if the Democrats erode the Republicans' power, that is a real problem.
Sure, absolutely. Well, other countries around the globe have gotten a head start. They've rolled out clear crypto rules. If we don't get this right, does the industry continue to move offshore, do you think?
And that's what we saw during the very scary Gensler regime. A number of companies just picked up and left the US. We're still in an environment where companies have to geo-block US persons for a number of different assets. There's, absolutely tons of money in the perpetual futures market, for example, but most of that trading is offshore because the CFTC has problems with perps as futures. They consider them swaps. That's just one example. I don't think we're going to see US companies leave as long as we have President Trump in place. However, if we don't pass this law and we get a Democratic president and we start hearing from, Senator Warren and what she's always wanted to do, which is stamp out crypto entirely, we are going to have an environment where US builders don't feel safe in America to build this kind of technology.
Yeah, I think I saw in committee she made some comment about, after it passed the banking committee, she was like, "Oh, I hope you guys are okay with the economy collapsing or something like that." I don't know. Well, it just seems like there's a lot of misinformation that still has to be corrected. And do you see any point to where this becomes less of a bipartisan issue?
It's really sad because it should not be a partisan issue. This technology.
I'm sorry, partisan. I should have said partisan.
Yeah. This technology should be neutral. I mean, this is good for America. This is pro-innovation. This isn't pro-Republican. It's pro-innovation. But unfortunately, two things happened. One, the Democrats, a number of Democrats, aligned themselves with Sam Bankman-Fried and got egg on their face with the collapse of FTX. And then two, the Democrats associate crypto with the Trump administration and the Trump family personally. So that has created a partisan dynamic that shouldn't exist. Obviously, crypto as an industry is trying to refocus the discussion on the technology itself and all of the good that exists in this ecosystem. It's not about grift. It's not about money laundering. It's not about crypto bros. And a lot of that comes through education.
Yeah, as much as we love the Republicans taking the ball and running with it and making some noise, I definitely think in some regards President Trump has shot us in the foot a little bit. But it's all in the way you look at it. But guys, we got a lot to cover here. When we come back, we got more with Katherine. So stay put, stay glued to the channel. We'll be right back after this break. AI is here, money is changing, but freedom has never been more important. I'm Matthew J. Moore, the Money Block host on BizTV, Amazon bestseller, and Bitcoin policy advisor. Book my up to 60-minute talk, Redefining Wealth and Freedom God's Way. I'll teach your church, business, or civic group how to secure money, freedom, and faith in the digital age. This is urgent, so I'm slashing my fee from $1,000 to $500. Cover my travel, and I'm there. Scan the QR code now. Spots are filling fast. What does it mean to be physically, spiritually, and financially free? The right to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness, these were the ideas that made America. But what happens to these ideas when America's money becomes compromised? What do you do when the very thing that you're working for day after day is fundamentally designed to enslave you? Whether it was a conspiracy or not, you won't believe what is about to happen in this country. Arm yourself today with the truth and build your life on the foundations for liberty. Rediscover freedom in the 21st century and grab a copy of my Amazon best-selling book, Foundations for Liberty. For just $11.99, you can support this radio show by finding a copy on Amazon or by going to mattjmoore.com. Again, that's mattjmoore.com. Don't wait, because freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is the final round of the Money Block. And thanks for tuning in. Just want to let you guys know that, this conversation around the Clarity Act, legislation for the digital asset space, very, very important, taking place in Washington, D.C., has been taking place. And we're all sitting on the edge of our seat, wondering what's going to happen. And we have the perfect guest on the line. We've been talking to Katherine Kirkpatrick Bos. She's the general counsel of a company called StarkWare. She's been in the rooms that matter and having the conversations with the people and that could change the way things go. So, Katherine, I want to pick up our conversation here. You know, we talked about the battle between the different industries, the banking industry, the crypto industry, and some of these hurdles that have been taking place. But, you know, we talk about how the sausage is made. Sometimes it's unpleasant. But when you take a look at the Clarity Act, if you could do one thing or change one thing, maybe it's some element about the bill, is there anything that you would like to see happen differently, whether through how things are getting done or maybe information or elements of the bill that you want changed?
Honestly, I'm very happy with this bill. So here's the thing that people need to remember. This, in my opinion, is akin to crypto's Dodd-Frank. So what I mean by that, and with one big caveat, this isn't in response to a big crisis, okay? This is more proactive than reactive, which is good. That's what legislation should be, although a lot of our material financial legislation over the years is in response to a big crisis, like the securities laws after the 1929 crash. And what that means is this is a giant bill. There's going to be a lot of rulemaking that comes after the bill. So it's not like it's going to be passed and it's going to come into force and then everything's going to change. Absolutely not. It's going to take years to implement a lot of the provisions of the bill, and the bill leaves big gaps. And what I mean by gaps is specific instructions for various government agencies to develop rules that adhere to the law, to this new law. That's the way it's supposed to go. So there's a lot of work to be done even post the passage of this bill. But what this bill is doing is it's blessing infrastructure for all of the regulators to appropriately build and truly future-proof laws that are specific to crypto, which no matter what they're doing now, it can't be fully future-proofed in a way that's akin to legislation.
Yeah. Well, for those who are invested into digital assets, maybe they're watching this, maybe they're new to the space, but what's one thing in this conversation about the Clarity Act that you want our viewers to walk away and understand? I mean, is there some kind of potential impact that you're hoping that they can prepare for or advocate for? What should they be thinking and doing?
I think the most important thing that viewers and listeners should take from this is that there's a lot changing with crypto. There's a lot changing every single day with the technology, with the growth, but also on the legal and regulatory sphere. And it's changing for the better. It's a positive thing. We're seeing the whole space mature. It's a nascent industry, right? We have to acknowledge that. There's going to be people that take advantage of a nascent industry. There's a long history of that. But, you know, you've heard the old adage where, of course, there were a bunch of auto accidents. Doesn't mean we should stick with horses. We're at that critical point with, you know, financial technology and improvements. And people need to keep their eye on this kind of legislation, the fact that it exists, the fact that we're almost there on major material provisions like this, because this is going to shepherd the next big growth period for this asset class.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you know, share before we wrap up this episode, I want you to share where people can learn and follow your work. I know you do these kind of conversations and interviews often, but where could they follow you for regular updates on this stuff?
Absolutely. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Katherine Kirkpatrick Bos. I do a crypto other news of note, the weekly happenings, an overview of what happens in crypto every week. You can also follow me on Twitter, K Kirk Bos, where again, I'm updating everybody on kind of material provisions. Crypto Twitter is a bit of a scary place, but if you follow the right people, you get great information from it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you know, this has been a fun conversation, but I want to ask you, give you the floor a little bit. Is there anything that maybe we didn't cover, maybe we didn't hit on that you'd like to share about your work and how you've been navigating all of this?
I think the one thing that I would just share is I am not a crypto evangelist to the point where I think it's going to replace our current financial system. And it's important to know that most of crypto does not believe that this is going to replace, you know, Bitcoin's not necessarily going to replace the dollar. No one thinks that, or very few people think that, even Bitcoiners, even if there's an opinion that it's a better asset. What I have always believed is that crypto is going to scale into a complementary asset class, and blockchain technology is going to positively impact market structure in a way that creates speed and efficiency. So we're there. We're basically there with Bitcoin. You have institutions, you have pension funds, you have universities, states, nation states. And, we're going to get there with a lot of the underlying tech. We've just scratched the surface on the use cases and the potential there.
Yeah, and since you've been in the middle of all this, is there anything that you've taken away from your experience here? I mean, how new has this experience been for you? Is there any takeaways for yourself personally?
It's been fun to get in the mix of Washington a bit. And that's a whole new animal.
Whole new beast, yeah.
So that's a bit of an ugly place at times. I'm happy to be in the private sector. I really think it's incredible. A lot of the people on the crypto policy front lines. It's an exciting time. I look forward to one day telling my grandchildren that I was there at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
It's fun to be part of emerging tech. Full stop. It's fun to be in a space that's actively growing, actively hiring, kind of confronting a new future. Like a lot of crypto companies are remote first, while a lot of the TradFi companies are, issuing a full return to office. So there are certain kind of fundamental lifestyle, cultural differences for better or for worse in this space.
And if there were any lawmakers watching this program right now, whether state or federal, do you have any words of advice for them when it comes to tackling some of the stuff that you've been in the middle of?
Learn as much as possible. We have come so far, particularly with regulators. 5 years ago, none of the regulators knew what DeFi was. I was constantly having conversations where it was like, what is a wallet?
Sure.
Now we are way past that. The degree of sophistication is incredible, particularly at the SEC. We're getting there. But it's also difficult for certain regulators to engage with crypto because there's prohibitions against trading or holding crypto. And the best way to learn about any asset, about any technology, is to engage with it, is to play with it, is to experiment. So I would say, hey, legislator, I'll sit down with you. I'll teach you everything I know. Give me a few hours. I'll make sure that you come away with it with a more positive impression that you may have had prior to our conversation.
Yeah, putting skin in the game helps, whether you're a lawmaker or an individual. That's the best way to learn, at least for me anyways. I definitely am a hands-on learner. But guys, this is all the time we have for today. And Katherine, I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you for giving us some solid updates on the Clarity Act. Keeping my fingers crossed. Hopefully we'll get something across the finish line. All right, we'll see you guys. Same time, same place. Adios.
The opinions and suggestions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants and are not necessarily endorsed by program sponsors or any station, media company, or platform broadcasting this program. This program is a product of More Media, LLC. The information in this broadcast is not intended as investment, tax, or financial advice. Matthew Moore is not a licensed investment advisor and speaks solely from his experience and opinions. All information in this broadcast is for entertainment or educational purposes only. Matthew Moore, More Media, LLC, and the company or platform broadcasting this program is not responsible for the success or failure of any person's investment decisions or purchases. Matthew Moore, More Media, LLC, and the company or platform broadcasting this program makes no and expressly disclaims all representations, warranties, and guarantees with respect to this broadcast and its sponsors. Investing in any market is inherently risky and can be financially dangerous. Invest at your own risk.